So United States 1960, that would be a hard one to swallow, a black guy with all that. How about in Europe? Was it completely not noticeable in Europe?
Who would send somebody that flamboyant? Because in the budget, he also bought himself mink coats, mink hats, stick out like a sore thumb kind of thing. A lot of upper class people had, communist aspirations. He didn't know who was going to win the Cold War. And he was able to also drive through certain places where there might be a base here, a base there. He was unsuspectable. Mr. Innocuous, he's a chony. That's what Russians call black people. They call them chonies. Meanwhile, he's getting the information. He's doing the job. He'd make people disappear. You walk in, he said, and you shoot them in the fucking knee. Everyone back then, come on, most people had fallout shelters. According to him, waterboarding doesn't work. Ollie North, I grew up around him too. He was having a hard time being around the kids. I said, Dad, you don't like the kids? He said, look, man, I'm having a rough day. I said, well, Dad, what's going on? He said, if you shoot enough kids, you'd understand.
Jeff Stearns, connected through cars. If they're bigwigs, we'll have them on the show. And yes, we'll talk about cars and everything else. Here he is now, Jeff Stearns.
Frank Mabry the Eighth. One of how many Franks that are your brothers?
My little brother's the ninth. My little brother's the ninth. My older brothers are the seventh, the sixth, the fifth, the fourth, and the third.
All Frank Mabry, second on.
All Frank Mabry. All Frank Mabry with, a number behind. It was absolute hell growing up like that.
What was the story? I mean, you and George Foreman, your dad and George Foreman. What's the story?
Dad has more, and he's been doing it longer, to quote my dad. George Foreman, I guess, picked it up too. Sounded great. Why not? My dad started doing it because he was a junior, and he went to Europe racing cars, and he'd meet, so-and-so, so-and-so, the eighth. Well, Dad had enough kids to give it a good try.
And some of them very close together. Remarkable biology.
Extraordinarily close. You made so many kids you could have in a week.
That is absolutely incredible. So are you in touch with all half siblings and siblings?
Strong no. There's a lot that I do talk to, at least a couple times a year. But, you have a big family, then you can pick and choose.
So this one, I don't know if it'll get us viral or, get Molotov cocktails thrown at my house. But the question after I talked to you on the phone the other day is, when is it okay to call a black guy a spook?
That's a good question, okay?
He didn't hang up on me yet, folks. He didn't hang up on me.
By definition, a spook is somebody who puts fear into someone, okay? So depending on where you live and how you were brought up, then all black guys might be spooks. Or depending on where you live and where you're brought up, then all white guys might be spooks. Okay? So it's really a perspective question. But if someone truly is a spook in a sense of they are an agent of the government whose whole purpose is designed to commit terror, and they happen to be black, then you can definitely call them a spook. My dad was an interesting character, though. He, one of those lost boys who was raised by the Marine Corps, you could say. He literally went to Korea at 15.
But was it a family lineage, like all of us joined the Marines, or what was it? Because you said lost boy.
My dad was partially raised by his grandma. His dad died at a young age. His mom, he lived with her, but then he lived with his grandma. Story's kind of wishy-washy there. He never got the whole story from Dad. And when I met his mom, then she already had Alzheimer's, so didn't really get the story there. But from what I put together and what my siblings have been able to put together, he basically went through school, joined the JROTC in school, then decided, school wasn't for him. There's a war coming. Might as well go join the Marine Corps and go be a hero, right? And then at 15, him and his buddies, they went and joined the Marine Corps.
And how would someone pull that off? I mean, in that era, could someone that age enlist?
So in 1950, yeah, he just forged his birth certificate. Forged his mom's signature. Yeah, that was a wrap. And the Marine Corps did figure out how old he was, and yeah, they kept him in because his mom said, okay, cool, you guys got him, take him. And she signed him over as basically a ward of the Department of the Navy. So he ended up in Korea at 15, turned 16 in Korea on the march up to the Chosin, Battle of the Chosin Reservoir, bloodiest battle that America's fought since Gettysburg. And yeah, he got his ass shot up there pretty good. He earned a Purple Heart or two in Korea. Got blown up there too. Spent some time as a guest of the Chinese Red Army until his prison group decided they'd leave, so they all escaped after the breakout at the Chosin. And yeah, after that he ended up somehow in the intelligence service a few years later. The Marine Corps sent him to school. They had him working as a UN peacekeeping troop, after the war, or after hostilities had died down. But when he was about 18, 19, then he met a rear admiral, or what became a rear admiral. He met a young captain. They said, you have skills that we'd like to exercise in the intelligence field. And after that, Dad just got sucked into the black hole of, special operations, and he did years of training. Probably from 1956, 1957 till 1960, then his life was just a black hole. Going from training with these people, training with those people, training with the Royal British Marines. He has all the patches. I have his all of his paraphernalia from that time period that he saved. He wasn't a war trophy collector like a lot of people are. He said people who collect war trophies, and have all this like this, all the cool war collectibles and World War II memorabilia and this memorabilia. His line was, those are people who didn't get enough line time. Those are people who didn't get enough kills. He said, motherfuckers like that, they must have thought the war was fun. The war was enjoyable. He said, I was busy getting my ass shot up, and this motherfucker was back at the chow line or an aircraft carrier talking about the glory days. He said, there's no fucking glory days in war. He said, when you're sitting there getting shelled by the Chinese, then yeah. He said, so no, I'm not collecting bullshit from that time period. He said, I don't want to fucking think about it. So I learned that from him, and but until the early 60s, then he was like kind of like a blank on the radar. He just literally went from training to training to training, leave here, training there, training, popped out a kid here, popped out a kid there. Special operations guys, you can look this up, Jeff. These guys, they can't stay married. They're marriage proof. All right, not just a little bit marriage proof. Okay, I mean they're gone for some undisclosed amount of time. They're not telling you where they're going, when they're coming back, and then when they do get back, they're usually in a bad mood and they have a bunch of PTSD and they're not pleasant to be around. So it's like, eh. But in 1961, then let's see, in December 1961, after he went to race car driving school on our taxpayers' dollar, taxpayers pay for all kinds of stuff. Then the U.S. government did something remarkable. They gave him a budget for operations, and their operations were they were going to create a nice operational specialist to go through Europe and do clandestine work in Europe.
So it's 1960, and his cover is a European race car driver.
Yeah, so you remember the Bill Cosby movie I Spy?
Yes.
Where he's a race car driver? Okay, so Bill Cosby, one of his best friends was Max Roach. I know Max Roach is Uncle Max. Bill Cosby got that story to be Super Spy from my old man because I grew up around Cosby. I grew up around those guys. Like, I never believed for 10 seconds that Cosby raped a damn person because I'd seen him at Thanksgiving parties. I'd seen him at holiday parties. And let me tell you something. Women were on him like flies to shit on a hot summer day, lined up. I remember him vividly at like 14, walking up to my uncle saying, this bitch just put these smelly panties in my pocket and said, call me later. He said, what, so I can get a smelly piece of pussy? Or the clap? Okay, that's what it, legitimately. That's what he said. All right, so it was like, and I looked at it and like, you're not gonna. He said, I've seen 1,000 of them. 1,000 of them. What? They suck my dick and I'm gonna make them famous? Yeah, real trade-off. The $1 million blowjob.
Okay. So you've got your very strong opinion or total belief about Bill Cosby and all of that mess.
You grow up around somebody and you see him in these instances, and you grow up around his, my Uncle Max, which was one of his best friends. It was Cosby, Max, and Peter Jennings. Peter Jennings was a really, 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 really funny guy. Really funny guy. He didn't call it reading the news. He called it, this is what they told me to say. Yeah, if I don't believe it, neither do you, but I still said it. I got paid. So, long story short though, so Dad was one of the pathfinders for African American racing, at least according to this lovely article, lovely magazine that came out in June of 2020.
Was it 1960? He was there as this driver with a campaign with a car. What, about a $300,000 car? What was the budget then?
To start off his racing team, they gave him about $2 million.
Oh, honest to God. In 1960?
Yeah. Okay, they sent him to race school. Okay, you remember, I mean, how much was a brand new three-well GT right off the showroom floor? That was a $280,000 car.
Oh, so there's your $300,000.
Yeah, so couple of engines, couple of tires, track time, fuel, crew. Then he had a Lotus, open wheel with that cigar body. Yeah, so he had one of those. Now that's another couple $100,000 for a race car. He had a Maserati, 2-seat for Grand Touring. That's not $100,000.
All right, so United States 1960, that would be a hard one to swallow, a black guy with all that. How about in Europe? Was it completely not noticeable in Europe?
Who would send somebody that flamboyant? Because in the budget, he also bought himself mink coats, mink hats, stick out like a sore thumb kind of thing. Look like the part. And that was the whole thing. Because no one's going to think this loud black guy who's, he's wearing jewelry, he looks good. He's hanging out with Britt Volvo, Sally Ringling, Susie Firestone. He's being a player, that lifestyle, and racing cars.
Was he playing a European, or what accent did he have?
No, they knew he was American, but who would think this American was a spy? In the 1960s, they're lynching black people. They're beating the shit out of them in the streets. They're you turn on the TV and look, they just fire hose 50 of them. It's the beginning of civil rights, and it's nasty, and it's not okay. It's the back of the bus, the back of the building, the back door, the garden hose water fountain, the you are a second-class citizen. Get used to it, no matter what city you're in America. So, him going over there and racing, no one ever batted an eye. No, no. He's the next thing. He made some money, and he's doing this. Yes, he's over here because we're civilized. So that was kind of the mindset that the intelligence services came up with.
What was the mission? Because you said inspiring terror. We're talking about you said Spook, inspiring terror.
Yes. So let's say somebody in a supposedly friendly government was talking to the communists, right? And they're in the upper class, right? A lot of upper class people had, communist aspirations. You didn't know who was going to win the Cold War. So people who were of influence, they might not do that anymore. Maybe this ally has somebody that our agencies find out is a turncoat or a double agent. They don't anymore. So that's what he did through Europe. And he was able to also drive through certain places where there might be a base here, a base there. So if there was a micro camera on his car somewhere, no one looked. He's just a race car driver, and he's black. He was able to go places and do things that no one else could do because no one would suspect him. He was unsuspectable. Mr. Innocuous, he's a chony. That's what Russians call black people. They call them chonies. Meanwhile, he's getting the information. He's doing the job. And if that asshole who's talking to the Russians disappeared that week, couldn't have been the black guy. or if that asshole could have been a black guy,
It's cover not blown.
or if this agency got broken into, cover not blown. Yeah.
Any idea? I mean, did he tell you, or in any documentation that you found after he died, or that your mom has, any idea what any of the mission could be? I mean, I'm picturing a James Bond movie, right? So I'm picturing microfilm and taking pictures.
So, say for instance, the Soviets had a guy in France, right? And the guy was working with NATO because NATO was a new thing, still in developing, and they had a nice hardcover guy. Then it was his job to go in and remove that guy. But the French couldn't know because you can't do operations on another country's soil without telling them, and everyone back then was afraid of leaks. So he'd make people disappear. And it worked. It was successful until probably 65, 66 when he decided it was time to go. It was the whole mystique of the black race car driver in Europe is played out. He said, they kind of got hit to the game when you'd show up in the town and their man would disappear. So he said it was his time to end it. He did it until he wasn't able to do it anymore. And when they cut the budget, he couldn't afford to be a race car driver, especially since it wasn't his premier occupation. He was busy shooting people.
Was he the one doing the disappearing?
Yeah, he'd make people disappear.
Oh,
yeah,
well, I didn't know if he was like reporting to the government that this is the guy, and now they send the assassin in. He was the one.
Yeah. He was the one who'd make them disappear. He'd say, he'd say, hey, look, I do bad things to worse people who want to do worse things to good people. And that was it. And he was a firm believer in that. He said, you got to believe in your country and your ideas. He said, and if somebody really, really, really was going to do something that would fuck America over, he said, then there's no limit on what you can do or how you're going to do it. He said, there's no question about it. He said the best opening thing in an interrogation. He said the number one thing in interrogating somebody. He said you walk in. I'm dead serious. He said this. He said you walk in. He said and you shoot them in the fucking knee. It's like wow. He goes you got to kill him anyway. It's like wow, Dad. But he stopped doing racing when Vietnam started heating up, and he started doing things over there. And that's where he came up with, him and some other guys, he said, came up with something called high-altitude interrogation. High-altitude interrogation is where apparently you take 5 insurgent types and you go up in a helicopter, X amount of high. He said, before you say shit to anybody, you throw the first 2 out the fucking door. You don't say shit. You just throw them right out the door. He said, then the next one, you blow his head off. He said, then one of the 2 that is the guy in charge is either going to talk or you hang him out the damn door and you fly him over the treetops. I said, wow, Dad. I said, wow. Like he said, it works. He said, if they're killing my guys, then fuck them. Yeah, it's the way you grow up.
Look, I know he's trained. I know this is how he's brought up. I'm sure you get a little bit jaded, a little bit calloused, a little bit. I don't know if I could do it. I mean, I understand the logic. I don't know if I could shoot a guy in the knee or, throw a guy out of a helicopter.
I don't know if I could do it either. And thank God I never ever hope to ever have to. Thank God. It's not my line of work, but Dad was one of those cold warriors. He's doing things in the middle of the 60s and the 70s when everyone thinks that the balloon's about to go up. Back then, the intelligence services, they didn't have rules like they have today. You always hear about all these crazy things from the Cold War, and they're usually true. As a matter of fact, they're almost always true because these guys, they didn't have an option. There was no plan B because plan B was DEFCON 1. Everyone back then, come on, most people had fallout shelters in the 60s.
So he'd laugh at, waterboarding.
According to him, waterboarding doesn't work. When waterboarding became a big scandal, he said, shit doesn't work. He said, what you do is you keep a motherfucker up for about 5 or 6 days listening to loud music. He said, banging drums, keep him up for about 5 or 6 days. He said, you really just really get him. He said, you play something just horrible for his ass. He said, and by then they've mentally fallen apart. He said, but if you need information now, then the drugs don't always work. So, and the pain doesn't always work. He said, depending on someone's conditioning, it depends on their, the method of extraction of information. And he was a firm believer in that.
Was he ever reverse role? Was he ever in the someone trying to extract from him?
His fingernails grew funny and he had no teeth. And he had a vicious scar here from what he said was water torture. That's where they strap your head to quote him, that's where they strap your head to a fucking board and water continuously hits you for about a week. He said after the second day, it feels like a boulder's hitting your head.
John F. Kennedy.
John F. Kennedy.
Any insights?
My dad did have some theories on that one, and he always said the conspiracy theorists couldn't be wrong. Not a damn bit. I mean, Kennedy's brain disappeared. Totally vanished, right? Okay. U.S. Navy Surgeon General at the time had the autopsy performed. Guy's brain disappeared. Yeah. Military-industrial complex is nothing to fuck with. Nothing at all.
How about 9/11?
So my dad was an EOD expert. That was one of his. That was one of the things he got his expertise in. As a Marine, the other line is, we blow shit up and we kill people, right? And one of his very good friends who he spent many years in the service with, a guy I grew up around, actually owned a demolition company after he got out of service. And he said flat out, unequivocally, there's no fucking way, unquote, that buildings fall like that unless you implode them. He said nothing falls that perfect. It's not possible. And the guy had talked to 20, 30 people.
It was like a perfect demo.
It was. You fly a plane into a building that's designed to withstand all kinds of hell. And then all of a sudden it comes down perfectly. And then if you look at some of the I-beams from 9/11, they look torch cut. They look like they look like they were cut with plasma. You know, and these were picked fresh out of the rubble right in front of you on live TV.
Man on the moon?
Man on the moon, real thing. We sent somebody to the fucking moon. He went to that whole thing with his boss when he was in the intelligence agency. They were there. He said those guys. He said they were some dumb motherfuckers. He said, you know why they were all white? I said, why, Dad? He said, because you could only get a white motherfucker to go to the goddamn moon. I said, what, Dad? He said, now look at this. He said, there's shit black people don't die from. Getting your ass shot up in a rocket isn't one of them. I'm like, well, Dad, okay, that's that might be something to think about. He's like, do you want to go somewhere you can't fucking breathe? No. He said, made by the lowest possible bidder. No. So moon, yeah, 100% believe it. I was always told it was real, those were some brave, dumb motherfuckers.
When we were on the phone the other day, we were touching on the Ollie North situation.
So Ollie North, I grew up around him too. When Iran-Contra happened, Dad was Ollie's supervisor, you could say, and Dad's boss was Ollie's boss. Reagan gave them all carte blanche on make money however the fuck you need to make it. Like, that's just it. But when they called Dad to testify in front of the Senate, then Dad did what he was supposed to do. I know nothing, right? They said, well, we got a picture of you, shaking hands with so-and-so. And his response was, you sure that's me? I said, yeah, look, it's you. And in his defense, then he, from about 60 feet away, he had 5 black guys, all in the same uniform. And he went and he stood them. He said, which one's me?
Which one's me?
He said, all niggers look alike to you people. And they lost their shit. Senator Exxon lost his shit. They lost their shit. They said, well, you're going to talk. He said, about what? But at the same time, I grew up around that era and in my family, and I know they were making money to fight the Soviets and do everything else the intelligence field needed. They didn't have the huge intelligence budget that they have now.
Can I search?
And
was your dad using Frank Mabry? Like, could I? Oh, so when he's in these hearings, how can I look it up?
If you go to Iran Contra, search Phil Mabry. In high school, actually, I had a history teacher, and I guess Iran Contra was one of his historical moments that he researched. And it's like, Mabry, I know your last name. Do you anybody who was involved in Iran Contra? I'm like, why are you even talking to me about this? Like Brisky, like, dude, like, let's not go there. And he's like, your dad was in the military, right? And I'm just like, yeah. Mm-hmm. And Dad came in and did a presentation on it. Basically said, look, we had to do something with all of our shit from Vietnam that we didn't leave there. Why not make some money? Oliver North was a good human being. He was a good staff officer. He was great at paperwork, but everyone always believed that he was the head of this whole operation, and he really got a bad rep for that. And that was just unfortunate. He was the classic bag man. He even looked like a bag man, didn't he?
So what about our most recent exit from Afghanistan?
That was a shit show. That was like that was an unmitigated shit show. Not only did some great U.S. Marines lose their lives, but we destroyed a country, and we wasted trillions of dollars. Okay, actually, we didn't waste it. We gave it to private corporations that built shit that just got blown up again later. It's kind of like the joke. The Mosul motor pool. In Iraq, there was that massive motor pool of tanks and Bradleys and Hummers and MRAPs, big, massive, thousands of vehicles. And then ISIS came in and took it. And then the Obama administration had a great time using drone strikes to blow it all up. So it's literally burning money. But this last one was really fucked up. I have a lot of friends from college who were there. I have growing up in my household, a lot of my friends became special operations guys, which is really funny because they were around my dad, and my dad, they're like, I'm gonna do Mr. Mabry did, I'm becoming a Navy SEAL. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll become an Army Ranger, and then Army Special Forces, or I'll become a Marine Raider, and so I have a whole cadre of friends who decided that was the path they were taking, and all of them, to the T, out of 15 guys I know, all of them have severe PTSD. All of them all say, your dad was right. I really shouldn't have done that. And, I mean, when you're fighting a war with duffel bags full of cash, I have a friend who literally, his SEAL team's job was delivering money to Taliban guys, not to fight.
Your mom, when I talked to your mom, she was talking about what your dad would say about the real price of freedom.
Yeah. It's high. It's really high. The real price of freedom isn't just the guy who dies on the battlefield. It's the guy's family. It's the guy who comes home. It's his family. It's living with a guy who's killed hundreds of people. All right, living with somebody with severe post-traumatic stress who's killed hundreds of people. That's what people don't get. When you live.
Did your dad have post-traumatic stress?
To the fucking extreme.
Okay, because when you're telling me these stories, he almost sounds like, here's what we did. We threw 2 off the helicopter.
So he made that shit into jokes. He's the guy who'd go to the movie theater to watch the latest war movie with us, right? And he'd be laughing his ass off. Okay? You know how people either they cope with it by this or they cope with it by that? To him, it was funny. or it had to be funny until it wasn't.
So that's how he coped.
Yeah, because Dad didn't drink. I in my entire life, I never saw my father drunk. Never. Absolutely fucking never. And from what I hear from some of my older siblings who are like 10 years, 15 years older than me, I didn't fucking want to. My dad did not. He kept it in as long as he could keep it in. But if it got out, then Jeff, it was, I was a guy who was at the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir, a guy who shot hundreds of people. I mean, they were fighting waves of 10,000. It was a guy who went on operation after operation after operation after operation where there was no fucking rules besides come home alive. That's the only rule according to Dad. Get home alive. Don't fuck around. Get home. So, he went and he used to tell us about going to Cambodia and how Cambodia, people don't talk about it, but it was really one of the most fucked up places he'd ever seen. He said the Khmer Rouge killed everyone who could think. Okay? Everyone who could fucking think. Teachers, doctors, lawyers, people who were literate, people who had any kind of opinion about what color, anything, people who had half a brain in their head, got shot or got stabbed, boiled, and then they had their fucking skulls stacked. My dad showed us pictures from his recon team, okay, of skulls, 10 feet high, 100 fucking yards long.
100 yards?
Okay. And, yeah, just stacks of skulls, buildings full of skulls. The Khmer Rouge killed millions of people. Okay? I'm Jewish. All right? I understand. That's a we say Holocaust, okay? The Khmer Rouge almost did those same numbers. All right? They were going to work, and they were using a lot of weapons that were in Southeast Asia that America left. And no one cared. The press wasn't showing up to take pictures because they'd fucking kill them too. All right? No one wanted to rein them in because they were doing their own utopia. So my dad, he had an operation there that he did tell us about. Him and his team went in to shoot Khmer Rouge leaders. They were given targets, and they went in and they killed these motherfuckers with absolutely no mercy. But he said the most disturbing thing was, and he told me this when I was about 26, 27. And I had my daughter with me and my nephew, and he was having a hard time being around the kids. I said, Dad, you don't like the kids? He said, look, man, I'm having a rough day. I said, well, Dad, what's going on? He said, if you shoot enough kids, you'd understand. I said, excuse me, Dad? He said they had child soldiers with guns bigger than them that had eyes like fucking dogs. He said, and all they knew is they'd kill your ass. All right, according to him, and then him and his team hid in a pile of dead bodies for a day to shake to shake the small army that was chasing them after they shot somebody. So if you had cold hands and you shook his hand, oh boy, it was bad. You'd see the flip, the switch in his eyes just go, and he'd know it, and there's just nothing he could really do. And another time when I was 15, I started dating a Korean girl, right? She was adopted from Korea. I thought nothing of it. I brought her home. Meet the parents. She walked in the house. He literally blew all the head gaskets. Not a head gasket, went right the fuck off. Told me to get it out of my house before I kill it. Unquote. She looked like somebody he shot. It fucked him up. I caught him at like noon with this in the middle of the summer, and he literally turns around and there's this Korean girl walking in and he just screaming like a banshee, "Get it the fuck out of my house or I will kill it."
So how long did you see her?
Actually, fucked up thing is, He actually liked her after a while. And
Oh, so
he
that
got to
wasn't
know
the
her.
last. She didn't disappear immediately after that. She would talk to you again?
She did. She did. We dated until the end of high school.
Oh, so
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Few years.
Yeah. A few years, 3, 4 years.
And he developed a relationship with her.
Yeah, she was a nice person, according to him. He said he just couldn't be around her when he was flashed out because he said, look, he told her this to her face. Like later on, he's like, hey, look, it's not that I don't like you. It's that I've killed a lot of people that look like you. He said, so it's second nature to me. He said, when you develop the survival instinct of seeing something and shooting it because it'll keep you alive, he said, I don't want to do that in my house. He said, I didn't know you. All of a sudden, I turn the corner, and there's a face that I've shot. So people don't realize the cost of freedom is really high. The families pay for it.
Millions of guys like in your dad's shape. So, I mean, we know about the suicide rate of veterans. And
No, so we know about the suicide rate, but we don't know about the impact. Like, you have all these veterans groups who swear, they do this and they do that. They do this for the veterans. They help the veterans with this and da-da-da-da-da. My question is, to all those groups, what the fuck do you do for the families? How do you help them? All right, where's the VA offers all the counseling for all these veterans. Where's the counseling for the fucking kids who grow up with a threat? Keep on talking and I'll blow your motherfucking head off.
Oh, I mean, it's got to be like an Al-Anon thing, like a wife or kids of alcoholic, rageaholic kind of idea. I mean, the whole family's.
Yeah, but so here's the thing. It's like you develop this thing where you love dad. My dad was the best dad ever. If someone fucked with me, a teacher, another parent, or anything like that, they got put in their place real quick.
Or disappeared.
Hey, look, I don't know about that, but I know seriously. I know I physically saw him growing up. I saw him beat up a teacher in the 5th grade. Okay, beat up a principal in the 6th grade. Okay, tell another principal he'd blow his motherfucking head right off. Go ahead, call somebody and see what they'll do about it, which is nothing. All right, and these are things I saw. And when you pulled him over, by the way, like back in those days, you pulled him over. The cop pulled him over. They ran his license plate, his license, and said, "Do not detain, assist." So the teacher, Mr. Ravery assaulted me, grabbed my nuts and grabbed me by the throat and told me, next time I fuck with this kid, it'll be the last thing I do. Police department told him, yeah, so Mr. Mabry didn't do that. He's a senior citizen, and he's a retired military veteran. And look, there's not much we can do.
So he didn't have any consequence about beating up the teacher and beating up the principal. There was no after effect.
No. So when we traveled, like you go through airport security, right? So he had a letter from the Department of the Navy, signed by the Secretary of the Navy. He'd hand it to security. They'd read it. They'd go call somebody. 5-10 minutes later, they'd right through. Never search him for shit. That's just the way it was.
No bags going through the thing? No metal detector?
No. No. No.
Did he carry?
We got... When he wanted to.
Like even getting on an airplane?
When he wanted to. He didn't. He wasn't a huge gun carrier. He liked knives.
Even more brutal. Even more brutal. That's something I could do even less than shoot someone in the knee is stab them. Or have their bowels come out.
A guy tried to carjack him in New York when he was about 70, maybe 73. Guy came up, ran up to the door. Give me your car. My dad opened the door. The guy went to, played feeble old man, The second the guy went to turn to get in the car, he grabbed him by his scruff and put a knife in his neck and said, how about you die now, motherfucker? You want to do that? And, somebody called the cops, and in New York, the cops actually show up, especially, in the nicer parts. So, yeah, NYPD is on point. Fuck what people say. They're way better than Detroit police or any other police. There's 50,000 of them. So, you know, they kind of have the numbers. But when the cops got there, then yeah, Dad had this guy by the scruff and had a knife to his neck and told him, you know, fucking move. You know, told him I haven't killed anybody in years. I'd love to do this today. And he came home in the best mood I'd seen him in years.
So because of what they see when they run his license, then they just let him go?
Oh, yeah, they never had any problems. We get pulled over when I was younger. We, you know, traveling from Maryland to New York or whatever. You know, Dad would go to Fort Meade or go somewhere, wherever he was going, or Aberdeen. And he'd drive down 95 at like 110, 120, 130. You know, because he knew how to drive that fast. And we'd get pulled over. We'd hand the cop his license. Cop would come back. I'm sorry, sir. You must be in a hurry. I am. And that'd be it. And we wouldn't get pulled over again for the rest of the trip. And I just thought that was the normalest thing. As a little kid, you're just like, okay, that's normal. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it was always just a riot, you know? I mean, and I got him when he was parenting me, then he was apparently much milder. You know, much milder when he was younger. And
according to your brothers?
According to my brothers, according to some of my older sisters, according to several of his friends. I mean, in his magazine article, then it quotes how he'd go collect money for jazz musicians. You know, Max Roach, Charlie Parker, Charles Mingus. They'd go play 2 or 3, 4 or 5 nights of nightclub shows or whatever. And the guys from the nightclub are saying, "Nigger, maybe I'll pay you later." Or maybe not at all. In New York, Frank drove a flashy handmade pimp mobile, all leather and chrome. That was supposedly given to him for services rendered. When mobbed up club owners hesitated to pay wages on musicians friends of Mabry's, Mabry would gather some of his bodyguard type, special operative type men, go to the venue, and break up the bar, demand drinks. If no cash was forthcoming, Mabry would sweep the bar clean, and it would work, and it worked. And if they really got tough, then the mobbed up nightclub owners would find out that they weren't so tough. Mabry was quoted saying, "I'm an ex-Marine, so I don't give a fuck. It's my private war. I get to fight with no fucking rules. They're fucking with my people." And I'd hear stories about that from Max Roach and you know, Charles Mingus III.
So your dad's a degree of a superhero. You literally have like a superhero of sorts for a father.
No, I'll send you a picture of this. You can put it on the screen. Literally, I mean, if you ever read, if you ever read James Baldwin's book, right? Then he's the character Billy Bones. He hung out with the black intellectuals because he was the black intelligence guy, and so he didn't hang out with dumb people. He couldn't. My dad couldn't stand uneducated people. He really couldn't. It was one of those things where he'd say, "Look, you know what makes a nigger?" Say, "Wait, what, Dad?" He said, "You heard me." He said, "Nigger's one of those punk motherfuckers running around the street with his pants hanging half off, selling dope with a gun in his pants, talking about how he's fucking hard." He said, that is the picture of what it is. It is pure ignorance, stupidity, and utter just foolishness. He said, and they're surprised that they get treated like shit. He said, "I'll fucking treat them like shit." He said, "They don't need a white guy." And he was right. Like that whole older black generation, there was nothing to fucking do with that. Nothing.
Do you think your dad, with your experience with him, was ever happy? Could he enjoy life? Could he enjoy a day? Could he enjoy a moment?
Yes, but
Because he had a lot going on.
it was the thing is, it was always a moment. It was always a moment. It was never. He didn't get long periods of time.
He didn't have a good year.
No. The good year thing never happened. He'd have a good week, maybe a good day, but a good year, no. It was the cost of freedom. It's the war doesn't leave people. People don't get to come home, and the intelligence service really doesn't get doesn't leave people. Those guys are messed up more than regular veterans, because the shit they do, they don't even have a fucking reason. They're just told to go do it. He said one of the things that really fucked him up. He said he went to was doing operations in South America in the 70s or 80s. He said he went to go take out some rebels or some revolutionaries or something, right? Yeah, some real hardline communist bad motherfuckers, right? Some real motherfuckers. He said, and they were in the hut. They were on this building. He said it's one of his guys, a guy named O'Connor. Guy was built like a Greek god, by the way. Greek fucking god. 6'2", blonde hair, blue eyes. The guy's muscles had fucking muscles. When I was a kid, I thought he was the strongest man on the planet. Okay? Just the Marine. He was a fucking recruiting poster, okay? Alright. He said, we went down there, we did the recon, saw all these motherfuckers going in. He said, our guy threw the satchel charge in there. Boom. Said, blew that motherfucker, blew that place down. He said, there wasn't a fucking pocket knife in the building. He said, these heavily armed rebels were banana farmers who wanted fucking 2 cents more a week. He said the budget was always there to go blow something up and go kill these motherfuckers. He said, but when I asked, hey man, how about we dig a well? There's no money to fucking dig a well. There's no money to do this. There's no money to do that. He said at a point you have to ask yourself, why am I doing this? And that's what really tore him up.
Well,
why am
once you
why
start
am I going
asking that question, he's not fully drinking the Kool-Aid at this point. He's not all gung-ho at this point. Now, when you start asking why, doing things like that's got to be hard.
It really took its toll on him. And he said it seemed like when he was in the intelligence service, when he tried to start branching out and doing his own thing and becoming an independent human, they'd always have something else for him to do. Like he started a soda company called Afro Cola. He's doing Afro Cola. He's making money. He's having fun, right? Then they got 6 to 8 months of straight operations for him to do. People to train, people to recruit. We're running out of operatives. Oh, that's because you keep on sending them on suicide missions, motherfucker. That's what he'd say. There became a point when he became higher up in operations. He said he'd look at the guys and say, oh, well, this is the mission. And he said, I'd look at the motherfucker and say, so how's my guy supposed to come home? He said, please tell me. He said when they were in Vietnam, he became disheartened, and he said the lights came on. He said the LZ they wanted him and his team to go to. He said they did some advanced recon, 2 days earlier. They got the mission done. They were getting out of Dodge. He said his recon guy, another great person I got to grow up around, guy named Orlando Roberto Garcia. Absolutely one of the finest human beings on the planet. And as a babysitter, because he babysat us a couple times, yeah. If you fucked with my dad's kids at the park, and you were a parent, and we were picking on your kid, and you thought you were gonna go grab us, yeah, he'd knock you the fuck out. But my old man said that when they got to this LZ, he said literally there were hundreds of fucking VC. He He said, literally, these motherfuckers were frying chicken. I said, what? He said, we smelled fried chicken from about a mile away. I said, what? He said, that was the last time I took any intel from these motherfuckers. He said, the last fucking time. So he became jaded by it. You know, you do over 30 years of military work, and that's it. That's why the turnover rate's so high for these guys. You just don't want to stay in it.
When did he start sharing these stories with you?
When I started becoming aware of what was going on in the world, and I started asking my own questions, because Dad always watched the news, or, you know, he's always reading something, or, you know, and then he'd give me his opinion on it. And I asked him, well, why do you have that opinion? And he'd look at me funny, and he'd say, all right, this is why. And he'd give me a suppose I scenario. And he said, so after he'd give me a scenario, he'd say, what would your conclusion be? Like, so now when I read news articles, then that makes me think, like the Obama's chef just died in, like, you know, Martha's Vineyard or whatever, paddleboarding at something pond, right? And there was a witness. The witness saw it happen, right? If you fucking believe that, I got a bridge I'm selling, okay? It goes nowhere. To me, that just screams like things that aren't possible to happen, okay? Paddleboarding, you usually have I surfed for a long time, and I've paddleboarded before, and usually you have a bungee attached to your leg, right? All those boards come with the safety bungee, okay? It's virtually impossible. Those things are strong as fuck. How you get around with that? How?
Well, I mean, I've been a paddleboarder for 10 years, and I don't use the bungee, and I don't die when I fall off in the Gulf.
Okay, well, so the chef was black, right? So most people would say, oh, he's a black guy. Of course he can't swim.
He can't swim.
When I was in high school, then I earned the nickname Blackfish because I was the first black kid ever in my high school swim team. And it was good. And in the 90s, black people just weren't in, like, swimming. Like, it wasn't, no. I was the blackest thing on the pool deck.
Like hockey.
There was a couple black Canadians back then. Okay? But I'd get up on the blocks and, you know, some asshole would say, oh, this is going to be easy. So, yeah, well, why is that? Because if you could swim, you'd be back in Africa. And I got told that when I was about 16. And, you know, it was a decent, like, one-liner for the guy, right? I beat his ass. Literally, I outswam him by a length.
Yeah, but that's because of half of you was related to Mark Spitz.
Exactly.
I don't know if I told you. I don't know if I told you on the phone, but you know, in growing up in Oak Park, Michigan, one of the kids we ran around with was I did tell you, Danny Feldman, who became like the dentist rabbi, black kid.
That's the ultimate right there, a dentist rabbi.
Your mom said, "I love that man." As soon as I saw him, you know, your mom still speaks with a lot of love about your dad. But you got a lot of brothers and sisters not related to your mom.
My dad had like 11 kids when my mom met him. When my mom met my dad, then he had 4 little girls in diapers. 2 of them are 3 days apart. One of them is a month and a half older than those 2. And the other one's like, I don't know, like 13 months younger than the other 3. And that's where she met him.
A month and a half between kids must have been a very painful labor to have twins.
3 days apart must have been a bitch, too.
So your dad was a black guy in the 70s.
No. The line actually goes like this. When you're black ops, you get all you can while you can. Mattress stains and pulling out are for fucking quitters. And that was the rap. Like, that's cool. You know, I mean, I got a bunch of siblings from it.
And he stayed in touch, remained a father to all of these kids in and out of wedlock?
For the most part.
Let's be loyal to the absent.
Okay. All I can tell you is my dad was a superb father. If I needed something and he could get it, he got it. If there was a problem and he could fix it, he fixed it. If somebody, like I said, somebody was giving me shit and they were an adult, cool. But he also taught me life lessons. Don't fucking quit. There's no reason to. The only person you're letting down is yourself. You have to have integrity. You have to stand for something. You have to mean something. You have to believe in something. And you have to be able to, you have to have something you're willing to give it all for. And those are things he instilled. But at the same time, he also instilled.
That's amazing father figuring. I mean, that's amazing modeling.
He also instilled absolute ruthlessness when I have to be. If I have to be ruthless, I will. To succeed, in this world, a lot of people are soft and they're meek, and I'm not for that. He was also ultimately opposed to what was emerging as woke society while he was still alive. He could not fucking stand it. He had no problem with people being gay, lesbian, this, that, the other, whatever you want to be. All right. He killed a lot of people and he bled a lot so that they could have that. Okay. That's their right. No one can say they don't have the right to be that way. You have a right to an opinion. You have a right to be what you want to be in America, but keep it to your fucking self. Don't shove it down my throat. That's what he didn't dig. He'd see these people, rubbing this and that in your face. It's like, why? Like, no one cares.
Where's he at? Where would he be at, or where are you at on like affirmative action? And how about then and now? Because to me, it's a difference. But
there's a huge difference. And the difference still is there. But at the same time, the numbers are balancing out. If you want to go to Harvard, you gotta have fucking money, okay? Or B, you have to be a genius. All right. You want to go to Michigan? Cool. Okay. You have to get the grades. All right. You want to get the grades? You got to put the work in. But if you weren't qualified for something, then fuck no. No, if you're not qualified, then all you're doing is you're being a detriment to anyone on your team. He thought of everything as a military unit. And he'd say flat out, if a guy shot 85 at the range, would you take him over a guy who shot 92 or 97 consecutively? No. If a guy could run a 6-minute mile and the other guy ran a 7:05, who would you take? You take the most qualified candidate. And that's what everyone has to understand, okay? If you're not qualified, don't bitch. Okay? Through every aspect of life. If you're not qualified to be in the fucking NBA, they don't take you, right? If you don't qualify on a racetrack, you can't race in the race. That's why there's qualifying 2 days before the race, right? They have the qualifying. Okay. So you have to be of that caliber. Other than that, you're setting people up to fail. And affirmative action did that to so goddamn many people. That's what no one wants to talk about. They put people in places where they were not prepared to be so that they would fail. Okay? It's a system that worked, but it didn't work. All right? If you put me in a room full of...
Well, I mean, everything's got its flaws.
Yeah, but that one was really a fuck.
Look, it had to happen.
No, it really... I wasn't around when affirmative action took place. Okay? When it first kicked off. But all I can say is from my point of view, from the life I've lived, and from when I was brought up around, it's one of those things that I can't agree with it. And from an employment standpoint, there's no fucking way. To work where I work, if you can't operate a lathe, a mill, and you can't read blueprints, you can't do fabrication, you can't weld, I don't fucking need you. Get the fuck out of here.
Well, I ran dealerships for almost 30 years, and I just based it on greed. If I thought you were going to sell or take care of a customer or fix something, you were hired. I didn't care.
Yeah, exactly. But you also learned to see a hustler. You learned to find the traits of a salesman too, right? Okay, and if they didn't have that fine personality of a salesman, somebody who's eloquent, remotely educated, and can speak cleanly, fluently, and directly at people, they're no fucking good. And they have to be tolerant.
Now, look, would I get excited if I could get a female or I could get a black guy? Sure. Because, I'd rather have my showroom full of people that a guest could gravitate towards. Oh, I want the black guy. I want the female. Like, I wanted to have that, but still from greed. It was still greed driven. It was to get the business going. That's all.
This has been Jeff Stearns, Connected Through Cars.